I mean, what can be said, Willie, about these two guys and what they do for each other?
I would say, first off, it's the competitive nature of both men, of wanting to be great, wanting to compete and play at a certain level. And, Belichick, of course, is the coach. So it's his job to align players and get them ready to play in this game and put certain players in position. Tom, it just seems like for some reason he still feels like there's failure somewhere where he's trying to avoid. And he doesn't want to face any of that. So he does everything in his power to try to stay away from that, from his body nutrition, figuring out ways to not let the opponent find a weakness. So he attacks all the weaknesses. He does everything to himself, so when he faces it, he's prepared for it, if that makes sense. You put these two together, makes for a dangerous mix.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I think the thing that impresses me the most about both of these guys, you go back and look at the Super Bowls, and when you talk about wins versus losses, incredibly dominant. But you look at the Super Bowls and how they finish up, every one of their Super Bowls decided by 4 points or less. So the thing that's so impressive is how good both of these guys have been at critical moments in the Super Bowl. I mean, Tom Brady has led a comeback drive or a big drive at the end of every single Super Bowl. I mean, you mentioned it in the meeting, Bill Belichick, his defense came up with that huge play on the 1 yard line, but nobody's better in the moment than these two guys, the coach and the quarterback, and they just seem to always make the right decision, the right throw, the right call at the right time, and it's why we're sitting and talking about them as being the best ever in combination.
And there are two things that go on. First, when you start talking about people doing what they're doing, there's the plan to do it. That's the inspiration that you got. You thought it up. You saw it. You see it. Now there's the implementation of it. You got to put it in play. And that's what Bill is just great at. Tom is incredible. He's made some last-second plays. He's always where he needs to be. But to make sure that everybody around Tom is always at their peak performance so that we get to see Tom's peak performance, that's Bill Belichick. I mean, he's just been an incredible guy to hold everybody accountable, to keep everybody on edge. I remember years covering these guys. I remember watching Seymour out warming up, and I want to go over and say hi. He's like, I know. Come over here now. Bill is watching everybody get ready for the Super Bowl, and he doesn't want to see me playing with you. That's important. That's as important as any throw that's going to be made on this football field. Any tackle is making sure each man is bringing the best out of themselves.
And when these two started way back when, I don't think anybody could have predicted this. So let's give some credit where credit is due. Robert Kraft hired Bill Belichick after his stint in Cleveland, okay? And the scouting department did a heck of a job evaluating a Tom Brady, saying, hey, yeah, he can play in this league. Drafted him in the 6th round when nobody else was going to draft him. And this marriage was made in heaven, because for 17 years, the consistency of these two, and there's ups and downs, of course, but the downs aren't very far down. Well, and you're talking about these two will be joined at the hip in terms of their resume and their legacy forever. So much success, and one couldn't do it without the other, but there are other people involved that brought them there.
I don't know that there's a greater story in sports, really, guys, when we think about it, than the Tom Brady story. And I've talked about this before. When we talk distance travel, your 6th-round draft pick that's about to get your 6th ring if you win this game. I mean, that's the greatest story I've ever heard in sports. I don't care what
in terms of what you just said, Steve, about hiring Bill Belichick, I'm assuming you meant his first head coaching stint in Cleveland. Otherwise, you mispronounced the words New York Jets. No, where he was where he resigned on a cocktail napkin, and thus the rivalry between these two franchises began to really cook. I want to turn to you though, Willie, because you were there. I mean, as you mentioned, Steve, and you guys have all alluded to distance traveled. You were there when the initial decision to stick with Tom Brady was made.
I think that's important.
So what was going on there when you were there? Were you all believing, on board? I mean, what was going on?
We were believing that whatever Belichick told us to do was probably going to work out. And, you talk about one without the other. Belichick had the insight to see Tom Brady and to name him the starter after we gave Drew Bledsoe $100 million, $100 million. And he had a close relationship with ownership. Drew Bledsoe is still close to ownership. Bill Belichick had to make that call, even when Drew came back and he was 100%, to say or see something in this kid to say, this is our future. This is where we're going forward. It had nothing to do with the season. It had nothing to do with any of that. He evaluated it. They brought him in. It's something he saw that nobody saw before Tom became Tom. You talk about the 6th rounder, a guy had no reps, no game experience, to say we're going to continue to lead, especially after Drew came in during the AFC Championship after Tom hurt his ankle. So you can't separate them because what they do is so unique and special together, but we all have valid points. I will say this, it's a great system, but you got to have players to go out and execute that system.
And we're having this conversation. I hope that they don't get that nothing happens in New England like what happened in Dallas after we went back-to-back Super Bowls and our coach Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones broke up. We've been hearing a lot of rumblings coming out of New England. I hope that's not the case because I've enjoyed watching this run by these guys.
Yeah, I'm just going through it right here. History of Super Bowl MVPs, looking at quarterbacks. I do believe, Montana had 157 yards passing and 1 touchdown in Super Bowl 16. That was his first, and that's obviously a guy that Tom Brady's been compared to. 145 yards passing and 1 touchdown in his first Super Bowl. So he was kind of the game manager that. And I do remember even watching, that was Pat Summerall's last game as a broadcaster, and John Madden was saying, hey, maybe the Patriots should just pump the brakes a little bit going to overtime.
And we were hoping the same thing.
That's right.
We were taking the momentum. But I think that's what you saw. You know, everybody asked you, well, did you see this coming? Nobody saw this coming. I mean, through those playoffs, I think he threw 1 touchdown pass. But maybe where you got a glimpse was there with 2 minutes to go in the game or just less, and instead of kneeling, Bill said, let's go for it. Let's do it. And you saw him methodically lead that team down, make the proper play at the proper point, no mistakes, lead to Adam Vinatieri's game-winning field goal on the last play of the game. And then we've seen that since. In the moment, from day one or from Super Bowl I until now, Tom's always been the best.
And you mentioned Drew Bledsoe. Before that drive, what did he say to Tom Brady instead of kneeling down? He said, just go out and sling it. And that was the mindset of that team, is just come aggressively and go down the field against you guys. And start of history.
A lot of respect for Drew, too. Just
he handled that well, didn't he?
He handled it well, but he taught us what it meant to be professional and to handle certain situations. And that's the ultimate sign of putting team before individualism. And I have a lot of respect for Drew. And to this day, you know, we laugh about it and talk about it, but we all know as players and being in that position, you always want to be the guy. And it's the toughest thing to watch when you've been somewhere your entire career and you have to sit and watch somebody else go through that and win that. So a lot of respect for Drew.
Yeah, Drew Bledsoe was on the podium after the AFC Championship game victory. He was the one who brought out the Hunt Trophy that then was handed to Bill Belichick, who then handed it to Jonathan Kraft because, you know.
That's chump change.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Chump change. You saw how he ended it.
Yeah, you take it. Yeah, you take it.
That was funny, Rich. I thought
you saw that too. Yeah, you take it.
Get out of here. I can't even let my players see me celebrating it.
That's what he said. He just took it and handed it right to Jonathan Kraft. Here, you put that on the hood of your car.